Chapter 14, V-Mail and Victory, Communication During World War II, 1941 to 1945. The year is 1942. The world has broken apart. Before we dive into today's story, make sure you're subscribed because trust me, you won't want to miss the twist I have coming next week. The United States is no longer just a continent, it is a global force dispersed across the map. American sons are digging foxholes in the black volcanic sand of Iwo Jima. They're shivering in the hedgerows of Normandy. They are sweating in the engine rooms of destroyers hunting U-boats in the North Atlantic. The distance between the American home and the American soldier is no longer measured in miles, it is measured in oceans. Chapter 14 of our history is the story of how the post office bridged these oceans. It is the story of a logistical miracle that shrank the written word to the size of a fingernail, flew it across the sky, and resurrected it on the other side. It is the story of V-Mail. To understand the invention, we must first understand the crisis. In early 1942, the military faced a brutal mathematical equation. The supply lines were stretched thin. Every cubic foot of cargo space on a Liberty ship or a transport plane was precious. The Army needed to send bullets. They needed to send blood plasma. They needed to send Spam and socks and gasoline. But the soldiers needed letters. Morale was considered a weapon of war. A soldier who felt forgotten was a soldier who could not fight. The War Department estimated that the single most important factor in a soldier's mental health, more than food, more than rest, was mail from home. But standard mail is heavy, it is bulky. Imagine 150,000 letters. In their standard envelopes, packed into canvas sacks, they weigh 2,575 pounds. They take up the space of a Jeep. To ship the millions of letters written every week would require a fleet of ships dedicated solely to paper. And the Atlantic was crawling with German submarines. Ships were sinking. The military was faced with a terrible choice. Send the mail and delay the ammunition, or send the ammunition and starve the men of news. The solution came from a blend of British desperation and Kodak technology. It was called Victory Mail, or simply V-Mail. The concept was radical. Don't move the paper, move the information. Let us visualize the tool of this revolution. It begins at the kitchen table. It is a Tuesday evening in Ohio, 1943. The blackout curtains are drawn tight against the window. A mother sits at the table. In front of her is a single sheet of paper. This is the V-Mail form. It is a standardized sheet, 8.5 by 11 inches. It is distinctively designed. At the top, there is a circle for the stamp, free for soldiers, 3 cents for civilians, and boxes for the address. The writing is limited. There is a thick red border. The instructions are clear, right within the marginal lines. The mother picks up her pen. She must use black ink, dark, heavy ink. A pencil is too faint. Blue ink might not photograph well. She writes. She tells her son that the garden is coming in. She tells him that the dog misses him. She tells him that she is praying. She does not write about the weather. The censors might cut it. She does not write about troop movements. She writes about the small, anchoring details of peace. When she is finished, she does not reach for an envelope. The form is the envelope. She folds the paper according to the lines. She licks the gummed edge. It seals into a small, compact packet. The address is on one side. Her return address is on the other. She drops it in the mailbox. Now, the industrial magic begins. The letter travels to a V-Mail station. These were massive processing centers set up in New York, San Francisco, and Chicago. The first step was the censor. War is a time of secrets. Every letter had to be read. An army of clerks sat at long tables, scanning the handwriting. They were looking for loose talk, information that a spy could use. If the mother wrote, "Uncle John says the factory is shipping tanks to North Africa next week," the censor would take a razor blade or a heavy black marker and excise that sentence. The letter would become a text with a void in the middle. But they were also looking for physical contaminants. The V-mail machines were delicate. They could not handle staples. They could not handle paper clips. And they could not handle lipstick. This was the great romantic tragedy of the V-mail system. A wife or girlfriend wanting to send a physical token of love would often kiss the paper with bright red lipstick. To the V-mail machine, this was a disaster. The wax in the lipstick would melt under the hot lights of the scanner and gum up the gears. So the censors had to reject the kisses. They would often return the letter with a polite note or simply cover the kiss with tape. The lipstick rule was a famous grievance of the war. Once the letter was cleared, it moved to the Kodak Recordac machine. This was the heart of the operation. It was a high-speed camera mounted over a conveyor belt. The operator would feed the letters in. Whir, click, whir, click. The machine photographed the letter onto 16mm motion picture film. The reduction ratio was staggering. The letter was shrunk down to the size of a thumbnail, about half an inch square. A single reel of film, the size of a cigarette pack, could hold 1,500 letters. Let us look at the math, because the math is the miracle. Remember those 150,000 letters that weighed 2,500 pounds? When converted to V-mail microfilm, those same 150,000 letters weighed only 45 pounds. They fit into a single mail sack. Instead of filling a ship, the mail for an entire division could be tucked into the cargo hold of a bomber plane right next to the pilot's lunch. The reels were loaded onto aircraft. The Air Transport Command flew them across the dangerous skies. There was a failsafe built into the system. The original paper letters were kept in the United States. If the plane carrying the film was shot down over the Atlantic or crashed in the jungle, the post office would know. They would simply pull the original letters out of storage and re-photograph them. The mail was immortal. It could not be killed by enemy fire. Let us travel now to the destination, a Quonset hut in England or a tent in the Philippines. The film arrives. It is unloaded. It goes to the processing lab. Here, the process is reversed. The film is run through a continuous enlarger. It is projected onto a strip of photographic paper. The paper moves through the developer chemicals. Swish, splash. The smell of fixer and acetic acid fills the hot air. The letters reappear. But they are not the same. They are ghosts of the originals. The reproduction, the actual V-mail the soldier received, was a photograph of the letter. It was smaller than the original, about 4 inches by 5 inches. The paper was glossy, like a snapshot. It had a slight chemical smell.
It was cut by a machine and slipped into a small window envelope. Now the final leg, mail call. This was the ritual that defined the soldier's day. A sergeant stands on the back of a truck or on a crate in the mud. He holds a stack of small envelopes. He shouts a name. Kowalski! Yo! Smith! Here! The soldier takes the small, glossy envelope. He walks away to a private spot, a tree stump, the edge of a trench. He opens it. The handwriting is tiny. He has to squint to read it. It is his mother's handwriting, but it feels distant, mediated by the machine. Yet the words are there. Dear son, we are so proud. The weather is turning cold. To the soldier, this flimsy piece of photographic paper was a lifeline. It was proof that a world existed outside of the mud and the noise. V-mail was not perfect, The soldiers often complained that the writing was too small to read by the dim light of a lantern. They missed the smell of perfume on the paper. They missed the texture of the stationery. But they understood the trade-off. V-mail was fast. A regular letter by ship could take 6 weeks to reach the Pacific. V-mail, flying by air, could arrive in 10 days. And the volume was staggering. Between 1942 and 1945, over 1 billion items of V-mail were processed. The V symbol became ubiquitous. It was on posters. Speed the mail, save the ships. It was a patriotic duty to write V-mail. But the system was not just for text, it was for connection. Since photographs couldn't be mailed inside V-mail, the machine couldn't handle the thickness. People improvised. They drew cartoons. They traced the baby's handprint on the form. The V-mail form became a canvas for the American subconscious. Let us consider the V-disc, a cousin of the V-mail. The military realized that soldiers needed music, but vinyl records were heavy and brittle. They shattered in transit. So they invented the V-disc. It was a record made of vinylite, a flexible plastic material. It could be dropped, bent, or shipped in a canvas bag, and it wouldn't break. The greatest musicians of the era, Glenn Miller, Frank Sinatra, Ella Fitzgerald, went into the studio to record special messages. "Hiya, fellas, this is Frank. Here's a little tune for you." These discs were shipped out by the millions. In the recreation halls of Europe, amidst the ruin, a soldier could wind up a gramophone. The needle would drop, and for 3 minutes, the scratchy voice of Sinatra would drown out the sound of artillery. As the war ground on, the post office became a master of logistics. They developed the Army Post Office and Fleet Post Office systems. These were floating addresses. A mother didn't need to know where her son was. She just needed to know his unit number. Private John Doe, APO 45, care of Postmaster, New York. The post office knew where APO 45 was. 1 week it might be in Sicily, the next week in Italy. The mail followed the guns. There were heroic stories of post clerks. At the Battle of the Bulge, when the American lines were overrun and chaos reigned in the snow, the post clerks were often handed rifles and told to hold the line. But as soon as the shooting stopped, they went back to sorting. They worked in caves. They worked in bombed-out churches. They worked in the jungle heat where the stamps stuck together in a brick. They knew that if the mail stopped, the will to fight would break. Let us end this chapter with the end of the war. August 45. The news flashes across the wire. Japan surrenders. The V-mail forms changed overnight. The anxiety vanished. The letters became jubilant. "Come home. It's over. I'm waiting." The V-mail system was dismantled quickly after the war. The microfilm machines were sold off or scrapped. The huge processing centers in the ports were emptied. But the legacy remained. Those billion tiny photographs, those glossy ghosts of letters, had held the nation together. They had allowed a father to see his newborn daughter via a grainy sketch. They had allowed a wife to mourn her husband. As you drift towards sleep, imagine the sound of the V-mail station at night, the low hum of the Kodak machine, the rhythmic swish of the developing fluid, the smell of hot lamps and chemicals, and the endless stream of film, mile after mile, of "I love you, I miss you, stay safe." Tiny words, shrunken by science, flying through the dark sky over a dark ocean, carrying the light of home to the places that needed it most.